because elevations help.
But it was
Also,
oh yeah, is that something that exactly. And that's when someone responded.
Okay, I think we can begin.
Yes. All right, all aboard that's coming ashore. All ashore that's coming ashore.
All right. So thank you everybody for coming to this. I think I've lost track already, but I think this program is now about a year old, a little more than a year old. And we've heard from a number of you who have offered to share how you came to be on Bainbridge and what you did before life on Bainbridge, and even some of it during life on Bainbridge. And it's been good. I think that the original impulse, Karen and I were talking about programming, and we wanted to post-COVID and lockdown, get everybody together more. Get more people knowing each other and what we're about. So I booked Frank in for August or September, I don't even remember
It
which
was a
one.
long time.
A while ago, and he said, I'm a little busy with the high holidays. So we switched things around, and he's now going to tell, he also said, and I think this is very interesting, right? He said, everybody who spoke so far has books out. I said, I haven't written any books. I said, it's okay. It's okay. And you can talk about the things that you lived through, and so he agreed, somewhat reluctantly at first, but I think he's done a lot of work in telling us he is, after all, our president. We should know who he is, and he's going to present a whole slideshow about his life. Thank you. And then afterwards we have lunch. And it is my birthday today.
Yay!
So for that you get extra food.
It's a man. Yum. Let it still feel it. You'll let it to you.
So I had hoped, I would say, the short history of the Jewish people, right? They tried to kill us. We won. Let's eat. So we're doing the eating part, and the rest is going to have to wait. It's unfortunate. But I think every year, every day is precious, and we need to celebrate. So we're going to eat a lot, right? All right. Anyway, Frank.
Well, thank you so much for making this happen. So this is a photographic journey. I had a lot of pictures to winnow through. And that's probably what made it very difficult, beyond, learning the technical aspect of this. The technical aspects of this. So, because there's a lot of photographs, and photography has always been very meaningful to me. From the time I was in summer camp, and my father gave me his old Leica and said, well, when you come home, at summer camp you learn how to print and develop film, we can set up a darkroom. And that's what, but the journey of course begins a long time ago, and this is my father's family, and the big arrow there, that's my grandfather Frank, my father's father, and these are his parents, Zelda, aka Jenny, and this kind of sheepish looking guy is Maris. And they came from a town called Yelizavetgrad in Ukraine. They came over in 1897 when my grandfather was 9, and they settled in the Boston area. And actually Morris came first, and Zelda was impatient, didn't want to just keep waiting and waiting and waiting, so she just brought the kids and came on over. She was that way, apparently. And you can see this picture is actually very descriptive, just looking at the faces, the different people. So this is my grandfather. He's the second oldest. This is the older brother, Matthew. They went into business together, in the printing business, in New York City on Varick Street. There were 2 floors. The brothers had separate businesses that worked together. One was like typesetting, and the other one was actually printing. And this was Victor, the religious one. This is little Joe. This is Rose, who was very difficult. I never met her, but I heard all about her. And this is Charlie. Charlie was, Charlie, you can see he looks kind of mischievous, and he was. He was sort of the black sheep of the family. Apparently he went to sea, and he eventually served in World War I, where he was gassed. He was in the Wagoneers, and apparently in the tank, one of the early tanks. And, he survived, but apparently the effects really shortened his life, and he died in 1936. He had a gas station, again in the Boston area. And this is Zelda. I was so surprised to see that picture. And this is my father's big sister, Irma, and you'll hear about her later on. This is Irma. So you can see, one of the fascinating things about this is how time travels. So that's Irma, and that is Irma. Irma went on, she and her husband Morty, they opened an art and music camp in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. And so that was the scene of like Arlo Guthrie. Arlo's mom was my sister's counselor in camp, Marjorie Guthrie. And Irma and Marjorie, they both worked hard with the Huntington's Disease Foundation, because that's what Woody Guthrie had died of. And this is my grandfather, Frank. This is circa 1924. This is my father's little brother, Bob. This is my father back there in his tricycle. He's about 6. And Bob settled in California. He became the music critic for the San Francisco Chronicle. So there were 3 siblings. My father was the middle brother. And he also was kind of the black sheep because he was always interested in engineering, airplanes. He loved airplanes from the youngest age. And that was very different from the rest of the family. The rest of the family were more interested in, cultural affairs. And engineering was not something that was considered very Jewish. You don't fix things. So my father was different. And this is my grandfather later on. He was kind of a joiner. He was, he was in the Masons and also a marching band and also with professional organizations like the Jewish Printers Association. And this is Betty, his wife. Betty, you'll see a lot about Betty. She was always a fixture in my life, just this elderly woman who remained an elderly woman throughout my life. Always Grandma Betty. And she died at the age of 104. So to have somebody in my life who was born in 1890 was amazing. And she was kind of a time capsule, just her way of speaking, her humor. So this was taken in the 40s. This is Frank and this is Betty. And this is also in the 40s. This is my Uncle Bob. During the war, he went to the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, learned Japanese, and so he was involved in intelligence. And this is Betty's class photo. Betty is over here. This is 1906. And I wonder if I could zoom in here, if they allow you to do that. No, I won't mess with that. Okay. And there she is again. She was big on bows. So that's her with the neighborhood kids in Chelsea, Massachusetts. It's my grandma Betty. And this is her beloved father, Jacob Krieger. He had come from Kovno, Lithuania. And he was apparently a wonderful person. Really, really sweet. Everybody loved him. That's why they called him Lampu. And so they came from, tragedy. They lost a daughter back in the old country, and his mother, his wife, had ultimately developed psychological issues. And according to Betty, they were from trauma. Who knows? But it was very poignant. And so they lived actually in a household that was very close with, ultimately with Betty's older sister's husband, who was fairly successful in the hosiery business. And this is Lampu again with the chickens. Lampu with the chickens. And this is Betty again with the bow. And this is her younger brother Hal, and this is Lampu over here. And so they're very social. And my sense from what she told me was just very, very happy. Everybody together. And that is her brother Hal on a Indian motorcycle. And this is here he is again with compadres. I just love this picture, just as a picture. Just all the faces, and the woman in the waistcoat there. And this is her big brother Jim. I think it was Jim. He was in the publishing business. He published it was a trade journal on lamps and lighting. That was their business. And this is her big sister Anna. And Anna was the Gibson girl. And it's funny because Anna's granddaughter lives in Seattle, and recently I connected with her. And I look at her, oh my God, you're Grandma Betty. It's like, wow. And there they are again. So that's Betty and that's Anna. And that's probably in the late 60s. And so this is Betty as a young mom with Bob. Now Bob was the favorite, and you can see that in the pictures. He's just very, laughy. And my father is always sort of, you can see, ill at ease. This is their home in Yonkers, New York. And so my father was kind of like the other brother. He was different in the sense of, again, why is he so obsessed with airplanes and building models and, just leave him alone with his thing. He's just, Oops. And this, I love this picture. This is at home in Yonkers. My father probably reading the funnies and my grandmother. And many beach pictures. And so this is my father, that's Bob, and that's my grandfather, and that's Betty. And there they are again, the flapper look, the headband, and the sunny favorite child. He always was the favorite child ever since So what happened was my grandmother and my grandfather, eventually they moved from Yonkers to New York City, an apartment. He died the year I was born, 1956. And my grandmother remained very much a diehard New Yorker. And she was one of these people who would just talk to anybody on the street. Well, she was in her mid-90s and decided, she better move to California, the Bay Area, where Bob lived. And so that's what she did. And of course, she just hated the idea. But she adapted readily. I don't know if any of you are acquainted with Piedmont Avenue in Oakland, right? That was like her neighborhood. And she would go down the steep hill to Fenton's Ice Cream and hang out there. That was her hangout. And she would know everybody, meet everybody. She'd go to Piedmont Market, steal chickens. Yeah, and then my uncle would go there and settle up the bill. And so she fit in really well. There they are again, another beach picture. And again, you can see my father is still, he's really ill at ease. And there he is again and that's Bob. It's like 1926 about. Lindy had not yet done his hop. And that's Betty and Irma and someone else. And here they are in later life. That's my father, that's Bob, and that's Betty. Betty sort of reminded me of Buster Keaton. She had these kind of hooded eye, hooded eyes, and she always wanted to know what you're doing. What are you doing? And she was one of these people who lived vicariously through other people. Other people were very important to her. And maybe, that was part of the era and everything. And it was kind of too bad because she was somebody who had a great many gifts. And she didn't really exercise them. It was all sort of vicariously living through other people. But yet, here's a person, Bernard Berenson, who was a very famous art historian and a connoisseur of Renaissance art. And she was a fan of his, and so they corresponded. So this Yonkers housewife was having an active correspondence with Bernard Berenson. Now, she was a remarkable correspondent. Her letters were really stream of consciousness. They were like James Joyce.
Wow.
And, and we corresponded when I went to summer camp and everything. And, again, her humor and was really uniquely Betty, kind of Betty James Joyce. And my father, both my parents, as you can see, they were volunteers in Israel in 1948. And my father received a letter from his mother. And it was so cryptic and weird that the censors called him in, thinking that was code. And he got huffy and said, "No, that's my mother," And so the censor said, "Well, be a good boy." And so that's my father during the war, and that's Betty. Now, during the war, my father he graduated NYU in engineering in 1939, and he decided, I guess this was maybe before Pearl Harbor, that war was imminent, so he decided to join the Army Air Corps and went to Chinook Field in Ohio, and he ended up serving, he served in England, so he would do modifications and repair on B-17s, and then went to liberated France, and then to Germany, and did some technical intelligence there. And so thankfully he didn't see any of the bang. And for him it was a very growthful experience. Now, very much like me, he was kind of a late bloomer. It was this genetic thing, you grow up slowly, which is actually a blessing, but you don't know that at the time. And his mother, bless her heart, thought, oh, well, I'll put you ahead, 1 year ahead. We'll enter school 1 year ahead. So he was always the smallest, youngest kid, and least, physically mature kid in the class. Boom, 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 So my feeling is that his experience during the war gave him a chance to grow up and have responsibility and experience leadership. And one of those people where warfare is actually beneficial. So it really, and there he is again. This is in 1944, relaxing at what used to be Hitler, may his name be erased, his retreat, the Eagle's Nest. Now, years go by, and in 1959, my father bought a gulfweed catch, the nocturne. And his idea was that he wanted to do something with the family. That when he was growing up, his father wanted to be away from the family. So he would play golf, and my father would caddy for him, which he really hated. So my dad never got into golf. But he resolved that when he started a family, he would want to do something with the family, and nothing like sailing. So he bought this boat in 1959, and we grew up on this boat. And I slept in the sail locker. And it was a beautiful boat, and very seaworthy. It was built by a 19-year-old during the Second World War who was building PT boats in the Lido shipyard in the Los Angeles area. And it was a really remarkable boat. Now, years later, when my father died, we had this idea. We would locate the current owner of that boat. Maybe it's around. And we would take my father's ashes and drop them right there outside of Angel's Light. We found that person. What did I do? Okay. So this is my father as a businessman. He found a technology that was really remarkable. It was the diffusion coating of, coating jet engine parts with chromium in a particular way, not chrome plating, but a way that you can make the hot section jet engine parts, the turbines, resistant to corrosion and damage, and repair them actually when they break. So it was one of these technologies where you lose money if you don't use it. A really good thing. So, and that started out actually when my father and my mother, when they got married in 1949, they decided to move west. And that was kind of their honeymoon. But it was actually taking the long way to Los Angeles area, because that was where it was happening in the aerospace business. And so he joined a firm called Turbo Products, very early jet engine technology. And so he learned about jet engines and the technology, and ultimately he found this technology that was from England and found a way of exploiting it and applying it to jet engine parts. And started a company called Chromizing Company, which was based in Hawthorne, California, which is Los Angeles. And that's what fed and clothed us. So there he is as a young entrepreneur. This is him as a sailor. So as the family grew, we had to get a larger boat. So 1965, we bought a 33-foot cutter-rigged sloop. It was wood, built in Poland, and that was called the Scherzo. This actually it's going back. This is still in the Nocturne, and it's a very, very iconic picture. I mean, it really, if I were to actually give one picture, this is what it would be. It just tells everything. So that's me. I'm the baby, and these are my three sisters. So that's Annie, who is now called Hannah. She changed her name in high school. This is my oldest sister, Ramah. And this is the middle sister, Karen. Ramah lives in the Hudson Valley in Germantown. Hannah lives in Kenya. and Karen lives outside of France, outside of Paris, the northwest of Paris. And you can see there's a dinghy in the background because we're heading to Catalina. And this is much later. This is my parents' 50th anniversary. My mother had slipped on some wet leaves and broke her leg, so she was we're still in Mendocino. We had rented a house there, and she was just relaxing there. And we were walking around and took this picture. And these are my parents. So now my mother's family, so completely different. They grew up in a small town in Connecticut called Torrington. I don't know if you're familiar with Torrington, Connecticut. Her father immigrated to this country at the same time that Frank did. He came from Poland. This is Joe, and his first wife, who is my mother, this is my mother, believe it or not, shoulders back and down, wearing an uncomfortable wool itchy sweater. Oops, sorry, my finger slipped. So they settled in this small town. They originally, I think they settled in Jellicoe, Tennessee, that's where she had her uncles. But Joe, at the age of like 12, he went to New York City as a apprentice plumber. I mean, it was tough. You did that. And so he had a plumbing business and a shop, and then two shops in Torrington. And of course, during the Depression, things were really tough. And often they'd walk around and get payment from people who sometimes had to barter, just give them, eggs or bread or something. So they grew up fairly orthodox. They kept kosher, but sometimes they had lobster. And it was a large family. It was a very large family. So this is Joe. This is his second wife, Annie. Now, his first wife was Lillian, and she died at childbirth with Lillian in 1926, when my mother was was 5.5 years old. And Annie was actually from England. She was a widow. Her husband was killed in the Great War. So this is, let's see here. This would be my mother's oldest brother, Adrian, who lived in the New London area. He became a contractor, builder. This is Lillian, and so because of the difficult birth, she had cerebral palsy, but she still lived a long life, and she lived in Southern California. This is my uncle George, and I'm still very close to the family. They live in Southern California. This is her stepsister Gwen, who she was very close to. And then subsequently they had another kid, that was Harris, who became a violinist. So whenever you hear the Simpsons theme, deedly, 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 when they're settling in the couch, that's my uncle. He's no longer among the living, but he was wonderful. And then that was Jack, who was, his first wife's son. And there was a big, I won't go into it, but a scandal. But I don't want to spend too much time on that. And that's Annie and Joe. I love that picture. And that's later on, that's my mom, and that's Gwenny. So my mom was kind of an ugly duckling. You could see she looks kind of like Jackie Coogan in that, that original picture. She was kind of overweight, and you could see she really developed into a very beautiful young woman. And this is Harris. I don't know who this is. And this is Lillian, and this is my mom. And so my mom wanted to be a nurse and see the world. She was a bookworm and really had a very active fantasy life that her brothers tormented her about. But she did what she wanted to do. She ended up moving to Hartford. She worked at Pratt & Whitney. She made aircraft engines, inspecting these engines, the R2800, the engine that won the war. And then she got into nursing school. But by the time, she got in, the war was already over. So she was working in Brooklyn, and she saw a photograph of, the massacres that were going on, like Mount Scopus in 1948, where, doctors were murdered. And she was talking to somebody, I think it was a patient, I wish I could do something. He slipped her a note. Go call this, go to this address, etc. So she decided to volunteer. And so she ended up in a displaced persons camp near Marseille in the south of France, where she worked. And then eventually she got on this ship, the Mala, which I think it was the presidential yacht for Teddy Roosevelt. And so with this, they went across, this was July of 1948, to Haifa. And this is on board the Mala. It's my mom and a couple of friends. And there they are. This was her good friend Marjorie Ziff. And this was what it was like. So this was the passengers' galley. And so here she is. She's flying on a de Havilland Dragon Rapide, which was a biplane, an English biplane from the 30s that was used as, I guess, kind of a light transport airplane. And there she is in Jerusalem. And this is on the beach at Jaffa. And in the background, you see this. This is an LST called the Altalena. And I don't know if you know about the Altalena. The Altalena was a ship carrying arms. It was for the Irgun. And this was a very seminal moment where David Ben-Gurion said, look, we cannot have, different armed organizations. We can't have that division. And these are arms that need to be for the Haganah. And so there was actually a battle. People were killed. And the ship caught on fire. And but it put an end to that division. And there's the wreck of the Altalena. And that's her ID picture. And this is like 1966. This is on board the Scherzo. And I love this picture. And and that's my sister Hannah. Now Hannah was a holy terror. She was very rebellious. And so, she could see sort of the mischievous look on her face. Very much, a rebel, but eventually she really did good and she did well. She became a nurse and a nurse practitioner and ended up marrying a cardiologist, David Silverstein, who had settled in Kenya as a doctor for Peace Corps volunteers. And he became the personal doctor of the president of Kenya. So it was sort of like last emperor of England, of Scotland situation. But he was this doctor. And so I won't go into the story of how my sister got there, but she ended up marrying him and settling there. And they got married in 2001, September 9th, 2001. So, being in Kenya when you hear the news, it's kind of awful. And, but we came as a family and went on a nice safari, and this is by Lake Elementaita. And that's my mother, my sister Rama, that's my sister Karen, and her husband Jean-François Joanneau, and this is Hannah. And so this is my mom, my sister, and this is my mother, and that was Karen. This is Rama, and that's Caesar and Tasha, beloved dogs. And there I am with Paella, and there she is. So my mother suffered from COPD, but in later years, and that's Hannah. But she was remarkable. She was a model patient. And for years she had a pulmonologist. And she was very popular there because, she did well for years. And I think a lot of it had to do with her spirit. And that's my mother with Dr. Chang. And then this is my mother front porch with her Dodger cap. in her crossword puzzle. She'd hold court there in the front porch. People would come by, and she was one of these very fortunate people who stay home, with her friends in their neighborhood. And so even though she had COPD, she lived to be just a few weeks shy of 97. And this room in our garden. Okay, so this is moi. So this is me with my favorite hat in Los Angeles. And I love this picture because I remember the backyard, I remember the hat, I remember the joy of, imagining things and having that fuzzy line between what is real and what is imagination, and loving it. And this is a class picture. Now, where I grew up until the time I was like 10 and a half, it was in a very special neighborhood in Los Angeles called View Park. And actually it's very close to where Mark Miller grew up. So we talk about the neighborhood. So you can see the demographics here. You have kids, there are a couple of kids who are Armenian. You have a couple of kids who are Japanese American, came from like the Crenshaw area nearby. You have a couple of black kids, because it was a place for upwardly mobile African American families too, just across from Stalker to Baldwin Hills, which is considered the Black Beverly Hills. And so I had the good fortune of, being colorblind. Just at a really wonderful time in history, which was kind of a short window, because in 1965 the Watts riots happened and the blockbusters came. They were real estate agents who would stir up the neighborhood saying, hey, better sell now because black people are moving in. And they would cash in on, and of course they would, finance mortgages for black families at usurious terms, because black families couldn't get mortgages from regular banks. And so they cashed in on that, and they cashed in on the foreclosures. So my parents were very active in a group called Crenshaw Neighbors, which tried to stop the blockbusters. But eventually we moved out in 1967, January of 1967, to the lily-white suburb of Palos Verdes. And what a culture shock it was. Now, jumping to 1970, I volunteered to work at a summer camp in Santa Cruz. Called Nicanor Daylight. My sister was a student at UC Santa Cruz. I eventually became a student there, years later, but that was sort of the experience. So again, these are just eras in my life. So in 1971, when I was 15, I went with a Skifty group, Southern California Federation of Temple Youth, to Israel. It was incredible. It was like $999, including airfare, and you spend 9 weeks in Israel, and two-week stints at a kibbutz. And this was kibbutz right outside of Jerusalem called Kibbutz Tuba. And so I took pictures, and so this is a picture. It's actually hanging in the religious school, taken at the wall. And one thing that I did was a lot of street photography. So I'd get on a bus with my friends and go all over Los Angeles taking pictures. There's my good friend Peter Kirkup, who we were always friends. I mean, junior high school, college. And we still, of course, keep in touch. And this was just an example of the street photography. It's another example. Turn around, get this picture in a bus. So a junior Cartier-Bresson. That was another picture I took in Israel. So in 1974, I graduated high school a half year early so I could go on an Ulpan program on Kibbutz Na'an, which is between Rehovot and Ramla. And there was a nearby Bedouin encampment, so we used to hang out with the Bedouins, drink coffee, took pictures. Just kibbutz kids. I think actually I took that picture in 1973. So I went to Israel in 1973 and during the summer to be just a volunteer on a kibbutz. This was kibbutz Ein HaMifratz, which is between Haifa and Akko. Now, while I was on kibbutz Na'an, I bought this motorcycle for $50. It was leaning against a tree in the Gan Yeladim, because the fellow who owned it, a guy named Ram Vidan, he was going to paint it up and put it on like a mount or something so the kids could play on it. And I'm going to buy this thing. So I bought this. And my father sent me some parts, like new pistons, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I'd get these awful funky tools from the electrician's shack and try to fix it. And so I'd always work on this motorcycle, and I'd go into Tel Aviv, where they had this kind of section of Tel Aviv where they had all these little kind of shops, it's almost like a flea market where you can get motorcycle parts, but no Harley parts, because there were a lot of old motorcycles in Israel, but they were all British motorcycles, like from the 40s. So Nortons and Enfields and Matchless, you see them going all over the place, but no Harleys. So my time was up. I had to go back home, and an associate of my father, actually it turned out that his brother was a motorcycle enthusiast, so I sold it to him. And the epilogue was he fixed it up beautifully. I would have loved to have seen it. But apparently when it was shipped overseas, because it was just so funky, they thought that it had contraband in it. So they impounded it for a while. And now, of course, these motorcycles are worth a lot. In 1975, when I was 19, I decided to take a trip. I worked in a junkyard in Los Angeles that had, they had Mercedes and Porsche, that kind of stuff. And I schlepped the parts all over Los Angeles. And so I got some money, and I decided, I'm going to go on a hitchhiking trip. It's just amazing. I think back, my parents, you talk about a long leash, like, it'll be okay. So I was inspired by a book written by Farley Mowat. I don't know if you're familiar with Farley Mowat. Who had spent time, Newfoundland, and the book was The Boat Who Wouldn't Float, about his adventures there on a sailboat that he had. And I thought, I'll go to Newfoundland. And I'll go to Saint Pierre Island, which is off the coast of Newfoundland. It's actually a French island, believe it or not. There are two islands, Saint Pierre and Miquelon. And so I flew into Montreal, took a bus to Quebec City, and then I took a train down to Nova Scotia, hitchhiked across Nova Scotia, and then hitchhiked across Newfoundland, and then got on a boat and went to St. Pierre Island, and my experiences were all really, really good. You know, I was Mr. Magoo. I mean, you know, just bouncing around, you know, nothing, you know, and probably the worst experience that I had on that adventure was thinking, well, I'm going to get a big piece of smoked cheddar, and I'm going to get a box of ginger snaps, and I'll share it with the people who give me a ride. No, I ate that. And so by the time I got to St. John's, Newfoundland, just flaked out. I'm never going to do that again. So don't give me any smoked cheese. It's like, so this is in Port aux Basques, Newfoundland. I took a lot of pictures. So this is more my family. This is my sister Hannah. She settled in a small town in Oregon. She had gone to, and that's her, sorry, my finger slipped here. So that's her in Independence, Oregon. So she worked at Salem Memorial Hospital. And so time travel here she is now with her husband David visiting in Holland. It's a picture of my sister Karen as bromeliad. So she settled in San Francisco and went to the San Francisco Art Institute. And there she is. She's really funny. So in 1977, so I transferred from UC San Diego to UC Santa Cruz. And it was a good move. I loved Santa Cruz. And I got interested in marine science, specifically in phycology, which is algae. And although in this program, this was a springs program, so you spent the spring at the Bodega Bay Marine Station. And actually Irv knows some of these people. This is John Pierce, who's an invertebrate zoologist, and this is me, and then Cadet Hand is over here, and he was the one who ran that marine station. And it was just a wonderful time. It was sort of like Kol Shalom, everybody, it's like the dream team, everybody just fit in, we just had wonderful times together. You see him? Yeah. So Irv and I both had been in Santa Cruz around the same time, actually. And it was just a wonderful group. We were studying echinoderms. So it was, starfish, sea urchins, sand dollars. And some of these people went on, to actually do that work. This guy, Pete Veit, he actually ended up working with gorillas, with the gorilla lady, Diane Fossey, yeah. And I didn't know that, but until I saw a National Geographic article, and there's Pete hugging a gorilla. I said, oh, okay. So just a wonderful cast of characters. And so this is in the Meter Street Cemetery in Santa Cruz. So I heard about this place. It was a complete wreck, and there's a lot of history there. And so I took pictures of this. So years later, I'm talking about maybe 3 years ago, I got a call from somebody who said, these pictures were published in the Leviathan, which was the Jewish student newspaper at UC Santa Cruz. And he said, well, I traced down your name. I'm doing a book on the history of Santa Cruz. And it turned out that George lived just down the hill from me. And he had gone to Santa Cruz, I think a little bit later. I didn't know him then. And so we became good friends. He was essentially my neighbor. So eventually this cemetery was completely, rehabilitated. And here I am at dinner at my grandmother Betty's. It looks, just looking at the way that I look, probably around 1978. And so that's Irma, that's Bob. This is Bob's second wife, and Mary Stevens. Oh, come on, where are you? Okay, sorry. This is my sister Karen. That's me. That's my mother. That's Betty. That's Irma's husband, Morty. And this person you might recognize. That is Chris Stevens.
He was killed in Libya.
Right?
He was the ambassador to Libya.
Right. And that's Chris as a teenager. So Chris is actually, or was, my cousin. My cousin, the therapist. He was remarkable. So he joined the Peace Corps. He was gonna, follow in the footsteps of his birth father, who was a lawyer, and his younger brother actually became a judge. That's Tommy. His sister Anne actually lives on the very tip of the Kitsap Peninsula at Foulweather Bluff, and she is a rheumatologist. But Chris was very much a people person, and so instead of just being a lawyer, he, after his experience in the Atlas Mountains in Morocco, decided to go into the diplomatic corps, which he did, and he pursued. Sorely missed. And last time I saw him actually was at my uncle's birthday party. It was his 90th birthday party, 2012. Was it February of 2012? In my cousin's house in Walnut Creek, and he had been the liaison with the rebels that deposed Gaddafi, and so he was a shoo-in for the ambassadorship, and he just learned that. And boy, I wanted to grill him. I really wanted to talk with him a lot. But I thought, what, this is a family gathering. I'm not a journalist. I'm his cousin. And, I'll wait for the memoirs. And sadly, that didn't come to pass. And so this is 1986. So I had, some professional aspirations. As a kid, I wanted to be a submarine commander. Then my father told me later on, you should check out biomedical engineering. That's cool. Okay. And so where my heart was, though, was really actually in taking pictures and, traveling, connecting with people. And I didn't really listen to my heart. But I did in this case, because beer is the thing that connects people. I liked science, but I wanted something where the results are tangible. So I went to UC Davis graduate school as in microbiology, and I was involved in a project of the bioconversion of lignin, to animal feed, or converting agricultural waste to animal feed by breaking down lignin using white rot fungi. Okay, you just explain that to people, their eyes glaze over. But at Davis, they had a brewing program, so should hedge my bets and take some brewing classes. Well, one thing led to another, and I moved to Portland for a doctoral program, pursuing that, lignin biodegradation. After 3 months, I had a fellowship, and I think this, the thrill is gone, as B.B. King said. You know, if you're going to get a doctorate on something, it's got to be passionate. And it was not that way. It was like, there's no end here. And I thought, I'm going to jump into craft brewing revolution. So I got a job at Henry Weinhard's in Portland. And I was there for a few months, and then they let me go because, you know, I was not kind of a company man. I asked too many questions, and I think, you know, there was an issue with the lab manager. He was actually a Christian Palestinian from Jerusalem. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I inadvertently went over his head on some issue, like, oh, this is not working, let me ask the packaging manager, you know, so I think he said, no, this guy's not gonna be very politic. So that was a blessing because I could start with Portland Brewing Company that was just starting. So I slipped a note under the door because apparently they were gonna do something there, and I got a call. So I joined Portland Brewing Company. So that's me, it's Fred Bowman and Art Lawrence, and that is Bert Grant. Bert Grant was a Canadian. He was a real pioneer, actually, in craft brewing, starting the first craft brewery in the Northwest. And here we are at the mash tun.
Mm-hmm.
So I went on an odyssey. So that's in 1981. I had graduated from UC Santa Cruz, and it was encouraged, you know, instead of just sticking around and working at a restaurant or something, because I had worked with my then brother-in-law in Oregon, building a pole barn for Delbert Hupp in the Silverton Hills. Maybe I should just go on a little trip. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to India and Nepal, because my sister was working with a doctor who had assembled a bunch of people to go on a trek in Nepal. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just go early and check out India and bring my camera. And so that's what I did. And it was an incredible experience. So this is one of the many pictures. This was a picture I took on the way to Shimla. And this is in Jabalpur, India. I rode on a steam locomotive. And so this was the stoker posed for me. And this is in Shimla. This is just a passerby. I love this picture. And this is in Khajuraho. I love this picture too because it really tells you everything about, you know, drawing the water. You can see the pots and everything.
These are wonderful pictures.
Thank you. Oh, okay. I'll be done pretty soon. And this is the concrete pump. This was, it's a city in Punjab that was designed by the French architect Le Corbusier years before, but it was still being built because things happen slowly. And this is a concrete pump. And what is that town again in Punjab? Where the
Chandigarh.
it's
It's Chandigarh.
Chandigarh. Yeah, that's Chandigarh. So when I was still in graduate school, I spent the summer working at Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, and this was back when it was very small. And this is Ken Grossman, who's a legend now, who was just an incredible brewer, one of these rare people who's very good technically, but also very savvy in the business arena. And then after Portland Brewing Company, I joined Widmer Brothers Brewing Company, and I worked there for about 9 years. And this is me in kombucha. So later on, I got into the kombucha business, and we started Kombucha. Back in 2005, I volunteered with a bunch of people in Biloxi, Mississippi, right after Katrina. Katrina happened in August. This was in December. It's a woman and this is me, and this is a group of people. A lot of them were Jewish, actually, and so we had services in the local church. And this is just some of the wreckage there. That's a boat. And these are slot machines. This was a casino barge that collided with a hotel. And we jumped to my wedding. Yes. So January 27th, right here. This is Rabbi Paul signing our ketubah, and this is my wife, Catherine. This is last year I went to England at Guy Fawkes Day at a town called Brockham Green. And this sur les quais de Ville Paris. And this is in the south of France. This is my nephew, really the only nephew in the family. My oldest sister, Ramah, has a son. As you can see, he's an artist. He's a painter. This is my sister Karen for Calquier. This is just rambling around for Calquier, resident cat. And this is a place called Colorado de Provence. Beautiful area. And this is my sister in her garden and her horse, Frosty. This is what she looked like back in 1953 in Sunland, California. These are the people I work with at San Juan Seltzer. And this is Julius the cat. We have 2 cats. They're both Manx. One is Birdie, and she didn't make it into the slideshow. And it's too bad because she's really incredibly cute, and that's Julius. And he's Julius because he's orange. And c'est le fait. All right. So thank you so much for coming.
You certainly had a lot to share.
Yeah.
And I think the photographs are wonderful.
Well, thank you.
It's really, it's a wonderful history that you revealed to us. And the things, the many, many things that you've done, it's just, yeah.
But no books yet.
Well, you've got the making of it. And if, I do a lot of Shutterfly books with my grandchildren.
Oh, yeah.
So if you want to put them on Shutterfly, we're okay.
And I did.
Very
Thank
good,
you.
thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
All